I posted cringe every day for 30 days. Why would I do this to myself? Well, it's my belief that cringe has become one of the most powerful social forces in the modern era, but I don't believe that's an entirely natural progression. So I embarked on this social experiment to get inside the machinations of cringe, because I believe that for some entities, cringe is no mere accident or natural byproduct. Cringe is the goal. Cringe, as we now know it, gained peak cultural relevance in the mid-2010s with SJW cringe and related brain rot, and yet it shows no signs of really slowing now. To define cringe too precisely is a fool's errand, because it naturally means different things to different people for reasons that we will get into soon. At its core, cringe is a feeling of out-group shame, of cultural irrelevance, of social exile. We can cringe at ourselves or we can cringe at others, but one thing is for sure, the fear of cringe is deeply real. In order to embark on this experiment, I needed to determine what cringe meant to me. So I needed to set my parameters based on what makes me cringe just at the thought of even posting or sharing it. To me, cringe is sincere, vulnerable, and crucially, try hard. Often, cringe is when the level of effort does not match the value of output. Someone trying really, really hard to do a dance, for example, but not performing the shame or self-awareness when they do the dance badly. That's cringe. Ultimately, I landed on the most dreaded cliche of them all, bound to send a chill down the spine of millennials and Gen Z alike. Sincere ukulele covers. It was perfect. I am a singer, and I chose to cover songs that I actually genuinely love, or at least once loved. So that covers the sincerity. While I do technically play ukulele, I am not very good at it. I learned like 6.5 chords like 8 years ago, and I just never meaningfully progressed. So that covers the level of try hard, not matching the value of output. And both of these things together, paired with not justifying, explaining, or apologizing for the content, covers the vulnerability. To keep people that I know or anybody who follows me from YouTube from guessing what the experiment was, I gave the series a code title, Day X of posting ukulele covers like it's 2009. Now, if you're thinking that's not cringe enough, that's fair. And I considered branching out further by posting something like a dance trend video or even like a thirst trap video, both things that make me want to disappear into the core of the earth. But ultimately I wanted to keep it simple, not only for my own sanity, but also because I didn't want to risk jeopardizing the perception of sincerity. And I definitely didn't want to just copy other trending cringe videos and make fun of somebody else. In order to truly be cringe, it had to be a cringe of my own making. So, week 1, I began my experiment. 1 post a day, a snippet of a song written before 2009, something which at one point in time I genuinely liked. Now, if you've been on my channel for a while, you might remember the David Lynch Moon Report, so it's not my first rodeo posting things that I fully expected the algorithm to hate. But the fear returned, you know, what if something does numbers? What if people think I'm being serious? What if people are mean to me? What if people are mean behind my back? The initial metrics were thankfully low. A few hundred views, likes in the low double digits. The good news is the first person to like one of my videos is someone that I genuinely like and respect. And the bad news is that the first person to like one of my videos is someone that I genuinely like and respect. Mostly silence. And I have never thought so much about all of the people who are encountering the content but not interacting with it. When I looked at my first week analytics, I was horrified to see that the algorithm was showing this content to the most cynical, unforgiving, and terrifying audience of all. Teenagers. I was a teenager in the hipster era. So in order to use that frame of reference to talk about cringe, let's take an objective look at the evolution, the cultural impact, and the eventual commodification of hipsters. First, my qualifications. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest back when Voodoo Donuts was still in a brick back room next to the adult cinema.
I made a NyQuil donut. It's just, how gross can that be? And then we ate it and it tastes pretty good.
I looked like this. And I've seen Stephen Malkmus live.
Stephen Malkmus really harnessed the acerbic talk singing of Lou Reed with post-punk influences such as...
3 times! Now, I personally wouldn't say that I actually was a hipster, but that's exactly what a hipster would say, so I don't always stay in my lane, but this is my lane. Hipsters are a uniquely relevant subculture to the themes of cringe. The irony at the center of hipster culture is itself a defensive response to sincerity. Sincerity makes us vulnerable, vulnerability makes us ashamed, shame makes us cringe. The modern iteration of hipsters, and the one that we're going to be discussing today, began in the very late 90s or early 2000s in Portland, Oregon. Argue with the wall.
Portland, Oregon was deemed to be the most hip by Movado.com.
Other places may try to claim that title, like Seattle or Williamsburg, and to that I say, my culture is not your costume. Although, sidebar, in 2007, I worked at the Starbucks in the mall in downtown Portland. We were allowed to wear Halloween costumes, and I went as a hipster. We still had to wear our aprons, and so on the back of my shirt I wrote, I only work here because it's ironic. It's pretty good. The culture was defined by a kind of mopey irony. In many ways, it was a countercultural response to slick, futuristic technology and Y2K glittery pop princess enthusiasm, which was itself a response to Gen X nihilism and grunge. In the beginning, it was all about indie music and mumblecore movies and retro technology and self-aware ugly shit from the thrift store. As indie music spread and became more mainstream, so too did the hipster aesthetic. Eat your heart out, Terry Richardson. Yeah, takes me back. But as with any countercultural fad, its initial meaning got swallowed up by consumerism and capitalism. Marketing turned the in-joke, self-aware, ugly mustaches of real human men in Portland and Williamsburg into prints of mustaches on every piece of clothing in your local Forever 21. LOL. I personally put the turning point somewhere around Mumford & Sons. The irony got repackaged into earnestness, and now today's youth thinks that the hipster era was in the 2010s because that's when all of the restaurants had mason jars. The actual origins of hipster are much closer to that one music video that Mumford & Sons made where a bunch of comedians are making fun of the overly curated rural old-timey aesthetic that Mumford & Sons was commercially known for, rather than any song that they ever wrote. In my opinion, that like hey-ho stomp kind of music was much more a product of capitalism than of counterculture. Real people in real life community with each other had inside jokes, went to the same shows, shopped at the same thrift stores, and made a culture. Capitalism said, perfect, I can sell that.
Put a bird on it!
I also don't want to gloss over the fact that hipsters were like a harbinger of gentrification and were like extremely guilty of a lot of appropriative stuff. So I don't want to totally glorify hipster culture writ large just because I lived through it and have some fondness associated with it. It was still white people doing white people shit. It's from Portland. It's not that capitalists fundamentally misunderstood the irony at the heart of hipster culture. Rather, they just ignored it so that they can more easily package it and sell it to the broadest possible market. So if you weren't born in the 1900s, your primary exposure to hipsters was something you could buy at Target. And I mean, sure, you might have seen some remnants on like Tumblr maybe, but even by the time that Instagram was launched, hipster was already pretty widely divorced from its origins. As someone who grew up in Oregon and then moved to Utah in the 2000s, watching this shift happen in real time was pretty jarring. The kinds of things that I'd scrounged for in Portland Goodwills were suddenly $70 and made of polyester at the Urban Outfitters in the Gateway Mall. And that commercialization made me cringe. So I started rebelling against that eventually too, donating all my American apparel and my little mini dresses that the kids today would call indie sleaze, and I started favoring florals and pastels and bangs, and oh my god, I got capitalismed into twee. They made a trend, the saturation made me hate it, and then, just as they intended all along, I spent more money on the next thing they'd been cooking up under my nose the whole time. I got, and by the time Jessica Day was prancing around on my laptop screen, I donated all my twee little floral dresses to the thrift store once again, and the cycle continues. Capitalism wants to extract money by any means necessary. That's its whole thing. This is why marketing agencies create problems for which they can sell you a solution. So when you look at a finger mustache or a millennial gray house and you go cringe, that's not merely your exquisite personal taste. That was capitalism's goal all along. It is built into the life cycle of every trend. They don't just want to sell you a thing. They want to sell you a thing so hard that you eventually hate that thing, and then you have to buy a replacement thing. forever and ever until you die. The older I get, the less I care about trends in general, for sure, but it's really hard to parse out whether that's because I've worked hard to find a personal style or because I've matured and I can better see through manipulative marketing tactics, or because trendy brands aren't marketing to me specifically now that I'm a married adult with a mortgage. They know that it's not that important to me to fit in with college kids because I'm not a college kid. I'm no longer in social groups with the group of people who's most concerned about adopting or creating the new cool thing. Like the original hipsters before them, Gen Z cares a lot about cringe. The natural desire to fit in is further compounded by a vast unseen audience of commenters and meme makers. When attention and engagement are the center of the economy, cringe is no longer just a social faux pas. It becomes something that stands in the way of your real-life ability to make money and survive. So yeah, cringe is a social mechanism, an important one that's always been a part of human survival. At its best, it helps us to learn social norms so that we can more easily participate in communication and be in community with other people. At its worst, and wielded by the wrong hands, it is a tool for manipulation and control. But underneath the capitalism and the control of it all, I think there lies another important truth. The things that make you cringe are things that you once loved or enjoyed. It's very vulnerable to love something that others mock. In other words, you only cringe because you care. Week 2 of my experiment was going along very much as week 1 had, but all of this ukulele playing reminded me of something that I had once made. Before this iteration of my YouTube channel, several years ago, I used to post satirical sketch comedy. It generally used the format of like popular trending content in order to satirize social subjects. So like an actress's morning routine that satirizes sexism in the entertainment industry, that kind of thing. But there was one video that just didn't really fit that theme. I wore fake bangs and fake glasses, and I wore a Forever 21 hipster dress, and I sang a parody song about shallow girls who sing cutesy little songs with ukuleles. I could make a lot of excuses for it. First of all, no one saw it. I had like 100 subscribers. My videos were not popular. I could say that I was trying to write a video a week and I felt the pressure to churn something out, even if it was a little shallow and a little toothless. I could say that I was ultimately trying to critique something systemic and just kind of missed the mark. And yeah, all of those things are true, but the ultimate reality is I was just jealous. I was jealous of their earnestness. I was jealous that they felt free and confident, that they didn't seem to worry about being perfect or even very good. They just liked it. And maybe most envy-producing of all, they liked the attention, and they weren't embarrassed for liking the attention. Now, my relationship to attention and being seen could be a whole video, and probably will be at some point, so I won't dwell on that point, but suffice it to say, I felt like I wasn't allowed to be that free or that confident. Like I wasn't allowed to be that sincere. So my defense mechanism was to say they were stupid and dumb and bad, and that I was smarter and more self-aware, so that way I could safely dabble in the thing I was so jealous of by satirizing it. I eventually took the video down. It didn't match the rest of the series. I felt like it came across as kind of misogynistic and pick-me, and that's all still true, but more than anything I'm realizing it's like, it's not even that it wasn't punching up. It's that I was just kind of punching myself. Like, I was genuinely only shaming the ukulele girlies because they had something that I wanted that I didn't feel like I was allowed to have. Around week 3, I started noticing cringe trends all around me and all of the content that I was consuming. While we may avoid like the plague the feeling of being the object of cringe, we seemingly yearn to cringe at others in everything from social media to more mainstream entertainment. From a consumption standpoint, cringe is king. I'm going to briefly discuss 3 recent pieces of media and how they relate to the themes of cringe. On May 20th, 2025, musician Brendan Abernathy released a clip of his song Married in a Year on TikTok. It's an acoustic folk rock song about the one that got away. It's often compared to Benson Boone, and I think that's apt. It's fine. It's honestly a pretty inoffensive little song. But due to a very specific set of memeable circumstances hitting the algorithm just right, the little tippy toes on concrete in socks, the blank-faced sea of audience members with their phone flashlights, the awkward little dance moves, he was ruthlessly mocked. For about 2 weeks, he was the main character of the internet, and that main character was a pitiable anti-hero. Now, if this had been me if I had become the primary object of ridicule for all of TikTok for 2 weeks straight, I would not have handled it well. I bet I would have felt so embarrassed and defensive and fragile, but not Brendan, or if he did, he didn't show it. His immediate response was to release several calmer, folksier, more acoustic versions of the song that were less, as the memes alleged, hootin' and tootin'. He referenced the tippy toe memes, but he didn't stop being sincere. He partnered with parody TikTok music star Kyle Gordon, who was fresh off his millennial stomp clap song, We Will Never Die. Basically, he handled it all deftly and with grace. And I'm not saying that the music has to be for you, it's not really for me, but the way he embraced virality, unkind as it may have been, was a perfect roadmap for what to do if you are accidentally hurtled into cringe virality. But why was the reaction so pervasive? Everyone was weighing in. There was a copywriter dissecting the lyrics' grammar. Music critics did blind reactions with exaggerated stink faces, and of course, the parody cringe comedians came out in droves. Some people criticized his perceived privilege, saying he must have a trust fund or rich parents. Some mainly criticized his shaky voice or his mannerisms, perceiving them as inauthentic or doing too much. A lot of people just sort of misunderstood the song, interpreting it as like a passive-aggressive takedown of the love interest, when, I don't know, I think it's pretty obvious that it's self-deprecating. In the viral snippet, he describes himself as the one that got it all wrong. He's saying he knows he's the problem, but he doesn't know why. Ironically, exactly what I would be feeling if I went viral on the internet for being too earnest. And I think that dismissing the reaction as callous bloodlust is too simple. Yeah, I'm sure that there are some people out there who just want to revel in someone's downfall, but I don't think that's most people. Perhaps some people who saw him as privileged were eager to see him get knocked down a peg. Maybe some saw in him shades of their toxic guitar-playing ex-boyfriend and they were just kind of projecting. But I bet a lot of people felt, first and foremost, uncomfortable, confronted by this blatant sincerity. They felt vulnerable. Normal, healthy empathy for Brendan and his vulnerability felt too big, too risky. So we have to pivot to judgment, lest we face his fate. This is the in-group, out-group mechanism of cringe played out in our own minds. We see the dog pile, we fear being under the dog pile, so we join the dogs. Around the same time that I was watching Brendan Abernathy on my little screen, on my medium screen, I was watching The Rehearsal on HBO. I have a lot to say about it, so I do want to preface it with a big disclaimer that this is not a thing bad critique. I think Nathan Fielder is a genius, and I really like the show. That said, my biggest struggle with the show is a lack of empathy. Not a lack of care or a lack of respect, but this like intentional emotional detachment from the subjects. Because of the way the show is structured, it's not able to really acknowledge the feelings or experiences of the real people that it uses as subjects. And I get it, that's part of the premise, but that's still what makes it hard for me to watch. So if you're unfamiliar, The Rehearsal is a docu-comedy following comedian Nathan Fielder. He plays an awkward, semi-fictionalized version of himself. The basic idea is that the world might be a better place if we were able to rehearse life's most difficult moments before they actually happen. They build elaborate sets, they hire and train actors, they gather a bunch of personal information, sometimes without explicit consent. Then they simulate multiple versions of reality. At one point in season 2, he creates a fake singing competition reality show, but the contestants don't know that it's fake. They think that they're auditioning for a real gig. And we as the audience, we get that same schadenfreude we get from American Idol. We get to laugh at the contestants, belching their hearts out, maybe not being as good as they think they are. But what's really happening is this: the show is tricking people into being sincere so that we can laugh at them. And they don't have the full picture, so they don't even know how vulnerable they're really being. At times, the pleasure of the show is getting to be in on the joke, which necessitates someone being out of the joke. So season 1 was praised by some autistic audience members who felt represented or seen by some of its themes. In turn, season 2 sometimes becomes a show explicitly about autism. It overtly explores the communication struggles, the social discomfort, the desire to rehearse real life that a lot of autistic people experience and relate to. The show then implies that while the semi-fictionalized Nathan might not realize it, he might be on the autism spectrum himself. So I think a fair read of this show is that my discomfort with some of the themes is precisely the show's goal. For me, as an allistic person, the discomfort that I feel watching the show, watching people be confused and uncomfortable and not in on the joke, mirrors how a lot of autistic people feel all the time. And this is where I want to say that it's not lost on me that a lot of cringe content on the internet is just people making fun of autistic or neurodivergent people. And in my opinion, all of that is stupid and unacceptable. Please don't do it. Can neurodivergent people be a little awkward sometimes? Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the diagnosis. That's like a big part of what the disability is. I, like many people, have friends and family members who are autistic or neurodivergent. My mom was a special education teacher. I was taught not to use the R slur back before it went out of favor, and then for some reason came back in. What is happening? Stop saying that. Anyway, the point is, I appreciate this show that centers cringe, also centers autism in a way that is kind and in-group funny to people who are autistic. At times, I do feel excluded by its humor, but I do think that that's for a good reason, and I also think that that's part of the point. Okay, and I'm gonna move on from the rehearsal, but I just want to touch on one more thing. So the reliance on non-actors, I think, is a really interesting trend in this kind of comedy space. Not only other Nathan Fielder projects like Nathan For You or Nathan On Your Side, where like literal non-actors are necessary to the like pseudo-documentary journalism format, but also things like I Think You Should Leave. It's another show I love, but the comedy only really works when you've got this ensemble of seeming non-actors with like a stilted line delivery and like awkward comic timing, where Tim Robinson and maybe one or two other featured performers are like capable comedians. Everyone else kind of seems like they wandered in off the street and they're just like reading off of cue cards. And to be clear, it's totally possible that a lot of these people who seem like non-actors are absolutely capable actors who just nailed this style of awkward acting, so I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying that they're all bad actors. It's just a note on that stylistic choice. It really seems like a function of the style is, in order to know for sure that you are in on the joke, it has to be obvious that someone is not in on the joke. That might be an uncharitable read, but like, I don't know, I feel like there's something to it. When I ask my subscribers what kind of things in media make them cringe, a lot of them basically just described acting. They didn't like long speeches that seemed like they wouldn't happen in real life. They didn't like misplaced comedy sketches or accents or musical episodes. There seems to be a growing discomfort with performance and suspension of disbelief. And it's hard to know whether shows like The Rehearsal or I Think You Should Leave are more causal or more zeitgeist, but overall this seems more like a shifting trend on the bounds of cringe rather than a timeless kind of cringe, if that makes sense. We collectively do not prefer fiction right now. And to me, that seems anomalous. Just as I was wrapping up this experiment and this script, I saw the movie Pavement. It's like a music doc slash biopic slash experimental meta in-joke movie. The film tells the story of the band Pavement alongside the production of a semi-ironic biopic and a semi-ironic workshop experimental musical, both about the band and its neurotic, success-fearing frontman, Stephen Malkmus.
Wasn't that fun? I hope you had as good a time as I did.
While it can be hard to tell at first which things are self-aware, by the end it's clear. It's all a bit, but a bit that points to a bigger truth. The portions of the film about the faux biopic feature Stranger Things actor Joe Keery. It's tongue-in-cheek, and he's portrayed as this very egomaniacal, self-absorbed Hollywood actor who's going full method to play Stephen Malkmus, all of which clearly in service of awards buzz or like a franchise. The musical, on the other hand, is portrayed as earnest and embarrassing with fully choreographed dance sequences and like theater kid vibrato on Pavement's indie hits. While this film is not explicitly about cringe per se, it does explore the themes. A deep fear of sincerity alongside a deep fear of being perceived as insincere. Fears of commodification or of selling out. A desire above all else to be cool. To not care, but also to care very, 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 very much. Seeing these hipster indie music royalties sort of wallowing in all of the themes of cringe that I had been working on and thinking about over the past few weeks was like weirdly healing. While cringe feels pervasive right now, it's not new. And even though it feels in many ways regressive, the way that we're interacting with it, it is being named and it is being explored, and I think that part is progress. Okay, so capitalism bad and cringe holds you back from self-expression. Well, what if I don't care about any of that? What if I'm actually totally cool with buying my Labubus and then throwing them away in a week when they're not cool anymore, and also self-expression is for losers and babies? Well, then you just might be the prime target for the worst and most dangerous wielder of the power of cringe. Conservatives. No group has weaponized the power of cringe more broadly and more successfully than the world's worst supervillains. American far-right conservatives. Where capitalism wields the power of cringe to get you to buy things, conservatives wield the power of cringe to keep you in line. Queer people with septum rings, cringe. Feminists with hairy armpits, cringe. Impassioned protesters showing emotion and caring about others, cringe. Obviously, they're angling to exploit that in-group, out-group shame that we had discussed earlier. Having sympathy and kindness towards the out-group? No, conservatives need you to think that that's like the dumbest, most embarrassing thing that you could possibly do. They rely on that heavily. But don't just take my word for it. Take a listen to this quote. But it is necessary to eliminate thoroughly uncalled for humanitarianism and foolish sympathy. It is equally obvious that we need to wipe out the sympathy for this element destructive to our people that one still finds in some intellectually deficient brains. Now, that might sound like it's from the Substack of some alt-right dork with a fashy haircut, and you'd be partially correct. This is an official monthly bulletin of talking points for speakers from the propaganda office of the German Nazi Party in 1935. Sidebar, I recently made a video about the connection between skinny talk and fascism, and I'm proud of it, but I do regret not being more explicit about exactly what fascism is and specifically how it relates to skinny talk. Some people don't or won't recognize the elements of fascism unless you literally explain how the Nazis were involved. So I'm going to be really explicit here. I am absolutely saying that Nazis exploited social shame, aka cringe, because they feared compassion for those they sought to destroy. And I'm also saying that Nazis still do that today, even if they don't call themselves Nazis out loud in public as often as they used to. I'm certainly not the first person to point out Gen Z's shift towards right-wing politics and both groups' relatively extreme reaction to shame and disgust. And I think your average Gen Z person has absolutely no nefarious intent when they feel secondhand embarrassment at an embarrassing dance or a vulnerable post. However, conservatives, like capitalists, have learned to use your shame to further their agenda. I do also think that men are a little more susceptible to the threat of cringe, not only because they less often participate in like the more harmless trends having to do with like aesthetics or beauty or makeup, but because shame is on the long list of totally unacceptable emotions for men to have under patriarchy. For a lot of men, it can feel like shame is simply not an option. So no, you're not an irredeemably bad person if you giggled a little bit at the memes of Twinkle Toes Brendan Abernathy. But if that is the only thing or the main thing that makes you laugh, if you regularly engage with that kind of content to the point that you're starting to feel that desire to mock and make fun of others, or so much that you are fearing being yourself in public, you might want to start looking for the hooks that the Nazis have already gotten under your skin. Now, that absolutely is not to say that some of the Nazis and the fascists and the conservatives aren't doing exactly the same thing that I did with my old ukulele sketch. If anything, they need even more to rely on the concept of satire in order to engage with things that are socially forbidden to them. And I think the absolute best example is that reality TV guy Josh Cedar, I have no idea if I'm saying that right, who posted dozens of videos pretending to be a trans woman as a social experiment. People began to point out that Josh had a different outfit in every single video. Josh claimed that he wanted to expose the woke mind virus, but may have accidentally exposed something else instead. An absolute delight at buying and wearing women's clothing. Now, I'm not saying that Josh is secretly a trans woman. In the past, Josh has also faked his own death, and I don't think that he necessarily wanted to be dead. I think the main thing that he wants is attention. Interestingly, though, he has publicly identified as pansexual and then later bisexual. Josh's brother says that that's all a lie and he's actually straight and just pandering to his gay audience. I'm not going to make any claims about Josh's gender identity or sexuality. Bisexuality and pansexuality are obviously valid identities and controversial takes, so is being straight. It is always disappointing when someone who is a part of or has aligned themselves with the LGBTQ community does something to harm other members of the LGBTQ community. Regardless of the motivation, that is what Josh did with this experiment. But I don't know, maybe you didn't need to go to all this trouble to prove that, what, people were nice and supportive when you said something potentially vulnerable? Wow. The woke mind virus of humanitarianism and foolish sympathy strikes again. I don't know, Josh, maybe you could have just worn the dresses. Okay, the final week of my experiment came and went, and here are the results. Over a total of 24 videos, I know I said 30 days, but I missed a couple, sorry. I received a grand total of 6,955 views, 338 likes, 10 saves, 5 comments, and 9 followers. My most viewed had 398 views, my lowest 166. My most liked had 31 likes, my lowest had just 2. Over the course of the experiment, my average was 290 views, 14 likes, and 0 comments, saves, or followers. So basically nothing happened. I gained a couple new followers, I got modest views and likes. Any comments that I got were good-natured. My fears around the algorithm serving my content to teenagers were somewhat assuaged around week 3. I kind of put it together that part of the reason they might be showing it to them is because the on-screen text said 2009, a year during which, trigger warning, a lot of teenagers were born. I could be wrong, but that's my best guess as to why my content was being shown to a younger audience. A lot of people give the advice that everything you want is on the other side of Cringe Mountain. While I agree that that's true, I cannot stress enough that it's a mountain. That phrase tells us more about consistency, discipline, and fortitude than it does about cringe. So yes, you probably have to go outside of your comfort zone to succeed, but more important than that is to do that so often that your comfort zone expands forever and ever until you die. So the real lesson is this: it absolutely doesn't matter. No one cares about you that much, and I do mean that in a good way. Now, people may react negatively to you. I'm sure that if I had kept going a little bit longer, someone eventually would have said something mean in the comments. But those people that do that, those people that root for your failure, that's exactly how they're talking to themselves too. They have that same terrified little cop in their head telling them to stay in line. People say to be cringe is to be free, and I think that's true. And having empathy for cringy people is the first step to that freedom, but I think the real trick is to have empathy for the people who fear cringe. Because when you understand that fear, and you understand that underneath that fear is a deep desire for freedom and creativity and playfulness, that fear of cringe starts to feel much, much smaller. Thank you guys for watching. Because I did take a big ol' hiatus, it would really help the algorithm if you guys could like and comment, share, press all the buttons, and please subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I have some very exciting stuff coming up, and hopefully it will not take another 2 months. Say bye-bye!